As of February 26, 2026, legacy Shopify customer accounts are deprecated, new stores never see them, and every existing store has moved to the new accounts platform. That platform is extensible, and the mechanism is customer account UI extensions. Today we look at exactly how they're built, where they can appear, what real data they can reach, and the real component code Shopify's own documentation ships as the example. Welcome back to Shopify Development Deep Dive. Customer account UI extensions let an app add real functionality to a customer's account: order tracking, loyalty dashboards, subscription management, return requests without touching Shopify's own account pages directly. Everything in this episode is pulled verbatim from Shopify's current developer documentation for this platform, including its real component code and its real configuration file. Here's what this episode covers. The 3 target types an extension can render into block, full page, and static straight from the platform's own table. The real shape of a shopify.extension.toml file, wiring a single extension into 3 different targets at once. How the Shopify global object hands your code order data and a navigation function once it's running. 2 real, documented ways to query Shopify data directly from inside the extension: the Customer Account API and the Storefront API. And the custom protocols this platform defines for linking between account pages and between one extension and another. Shopify's own overview page describes the extension as 3 interconnected parts. Targets decide where in the customer account interface your extension is even allowed to render. Target APIs are the data and functionality your code can reach once it's there, almost entirely through one Shopify global object. Web components are the actual visual building blocks: cards, stacks, badges, buttons built on Remote DOM, Shopify's cross-platform UI library, and styled to automatically match the account's own design system. Underneath all 3 sits the config file, shopify.extension.toml, which wires specific targets to specific module files. And none of it ships anywhere until Shopify App Deploy bundles it with a real, documented hard limit of 64 kilobytes per compiled extension. 3 target types, per the real table on Shopify's overview page. Block targets render at merchant-defined locations, placed using the checkout and accounts editor, good for content that doesn't depend on any one specific page feature. Full page targets create entirely new routes inside customer accounts: customer account.page.render for a standalone page like a loyalty dashboard, or the order-specific variant for something like a return request workflow tied to one order. Static targets are the narrowest, fixed locations tied to one specific page feature, like an order action menu item or an announcement banner, and they only appear at all when that feature is present. The real starting command, straight from Shopify's Getting Started section. Shopify app, generate extension, run from your app's root directory. Customer account UI extensions require a TOML configuration file plus TSX or JSX files containing Preact-based extension code, and the CLI scaffolds, all of it essential configuration, starter files, the works so you're editing Rail-generated code from the very first step, not building the skeleton yourself. This is the real configuration Shopify's own docs use to demonstrate the format, trimmed only to fit the frame. 1 extension, API version 2026-07, and 3 separate targeting blocks, each one a real target identifier paired with its own module file. A block on the order status page, a block on the profile page, and a genuinely new full page for the loyalty dashboard itself. Every target in this file must point to a separate module. That's a hard rule, not a convention, which is exactly why there are 3 distinct TSX files listed here instead of one shared component. The same real config file continues with capabilities, and these are opt-in on purpose. API access lets the extension call the Storefront API without you managing tokens by hand. Network access is what allows any external fetch call at all to your own backend, or anywhere else. Collect buyer consent, with customer privacy set true, is specifically how an extension is allowed to gather consent for something like SMS marketing. And the meta fields block declares exactly which namespace and key this extension is permitted to read or write scoped access, not a blanket grant to every meta field on the store. This is the real order status example straight from the docs. Notice there's no import for that Shopify object anywhere in the file. Shopify injects it as a global at runtime, which is exactly why the docs warn you to add it to your ESLint globals config, or your linter will flag every single reference as undefined. Shopify.order.value gives you the current order. Here it's read straight into an scard component showing the order's name and its ID, with optional chaining protecting against the instant before that value is populated. This is the real composed component example, exactly the kind of richer interface the docs point to when they say to combine stack, section, badge, and button. A block direction stack holding a heading and an inline direction stack for the badge and points text, then a button. That button's own click handler calls shopify.navigation.navigate, using the real extension protocol to jump straight to a different extension's rewards route by its handle, one line of real code demonstrating cross-extension navigation inside customer accounts. This is the real customer account API example, and the detail worth catching is that literal Shopify protocol URL shopify://customer account/API/the API version/graphical.json. The docs are explicit that requests to this endpoint are automatically authenticated, no capability flag, no manual session token, no separate auth step. The query itself asks for exactly 3 fields: first name, last name, and the customer's email address, and that's the entire real shape of a direct, authenticated GraphQL request to Shopify's own customer data from inside the extension. A few real constraints worth internalizing before you build. Every extension runs isolated inside a web worker. Shopify's own security section is explicit that it has no access to window, no access to the DOM, and no access to the account page's own HTML or other assets. Turning on network access isn't just a TOML flag, it also requires requesting access in the partner dashboard, and your own backend's responses need an access control allow origin wildcard header, precisely because a web worker's origin is null. If your extension touches anything Shopify classifies as protected customer data, that access needs separate approval before it's allowed to go live. And that 64 kilobyte compiled bundle limit is enforced automatically at deploy time. It isn't a soft guideline. Pulling it together. Legacy Shopify customer accounts stopped existing for new stores back in February of this year, which makes this extensible platform the only one left to build against. 3 target types: block, full page, and static decide where an extension is even allowed to render, from a small block on the profile page all the way up to an entirely new dashboard route. One real shopify.extension.toml file can wire a single extension into several of those targets at once, each pointed at its own separate module. The Shopify global object is the actual bridge to everything useful: order data, a navigation function, and direct authenticated access to both the customer account API and the Storefront API. And every capability beyond the basics: network access, Storefront API access, buyer consent collection is opt-in, reviewed, and scoped, exactly the way Shopify's own security model describes it. That's customer account UI extensions, the 3-part model, the real config file, the real component code, and the real constraints Shopify enforces around a customer's own data. Part 15 moves from the customer-facing side of the platform into the admin GraphQL API itself: schema, versioning, and query basics. If you want the rest of this series as it publishes, subscribe now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in Part 15.